We are live here at the Shitter with Mike. Thanks for joining us, Mike. It's Mike's show today, and he's going to be talking about primarily Mike's talks analog, because we know him. You do a lot of digital stuff, but what some people don't know is that you also do a lot of analog stuff for Schiit. And if you just kind of wanted to kick it off with you by asking, what do you do in terms of Schiit with analog, and what brought you to analog, and what's your history with this wonderful non-digital way of listening to music?
Well, hi there, everybody. Thanks for being here. And oh, by the way, before the show is over, Jason's here in the building someplace. We're going to pull him in here and have a little Mike-Jason dialogue just so that we can do that, because we have a lot of fun doing so. Anyway, why did I do analog? Because when I started in the audio business, which was the late 70s, there wasn't any digital. It was all analog. And back in that time, the two big leaning companies were Marantz and Macintosh. And they were sort of the high end, we're good, we're great. You get a hernia carrying our stuff around, therefore it has to be good. And it was had industrial design, which was early for the time. It didn't look like a science weather station or something. And it was actually as good as you could get back then. The problem, I decided that I wanted to build a preamp, and I wanted to build a preamp because I'd started out going through college working on old Dynaco amplifiers and preamplifiers. And what was wrong with those were the same thing that was wrong with Macintoshes and Marantz's, and that is they were based on the 12AX7, which was a tube that, if Jason actually admits that he got his start in a company that built record players, that's record players integrated in a little box that were used at the time primarily in schools to indoctrinate and teach young children in how to be good citizens and teach them about science and so on. Where there was media available on records. And the 12AX7 was designed to go in those sorts of applications. In other words, when it had to be cheap, it had to be small, and it had to be simple, because it couldn't blow up. And that was the 12AX7. And I was absolutely amazed that the 12A family, AXAU, found itself into the highest end of audio companies, because it really was a garbage tube. If you looked at, and I'm sorry to offend anybody, because I know there's a lot of people out there that just love them, but if you look at an oscilloscope at the time, which of course had to have accurate amplifiers in it, there weren't any 12AX7s, 12AU, 12A nothings in there. They were all 6DJ8s. And yet there was no audio gear with 6DJ8s in it. So I said, hey, let's build something with a 6DJ8. So my early R&D was the 6DJ8s had a bandwidth where radio stations would go through them. They oscillated. They were all sorts of problems and so on and so forth. And I loved audio, but I was wondering, all about the wisdom of screwing around with this stuff that had so many potential problems. And since nobody else was doing this in audio, I didn't have anybody to ask questions to, so I just had to suffer my own little mishaps. But I finally figured it out, and I finally got it going, and then I realized, these things are so low distortion, you don't need feedback. So I went, let's go feedbackless. And then, wait a minute, all the other preamps of the time There's this thing called RCA equalization, and it's a standardized equalization that's used for all records, all long-playing records, and it's always in phono preamps. And there's one in the Manny, of course, but I think there's a question on that we'll get to later. So I figure, well, everybody else used feedback RCA equalization, which means you tend to run out of gain on the bottom end, and the bottom end gets really tubey and floppy and kind of flatulent sounding. And it just wasn't my kind of sound, so I figured, let's do passive equalization. And then I did passive equalization, and then I realized, hey, another advantage of passive equalization is if you pick the right parts and get the 1% parts, you can be within 1/10 of a dB, and you're not going to have equalization that varies around all over the place as you switch brands of tubes or as the tubes get old and have less gain or whatever. And so then I had this preamp that was no feedback, nada. Passive equalization, and I finally got it so that it wouldn't act like an old-fashioned, old-timey crystal radio, and you could listen to radio stations in Chicago. And built it, and son of a bitch, it sounded really good. I mean, really good. And it didn't sound that didn't have that floppy tube kind of sound, but yet it was tubey nice in the mid-range and everything else. Mm-hmm. And I built it back in the late 70s and sold actually quite a few of them. It was a good product. And then I followed that with back then moving coils were everybody that wanted to invite all people over to their house to look at their cartridge and not listen to any music at all had moving coil cartridges, which I think are still kind of popular in some circles today. They're not my favorite. So I decided I was going to build a tube preamp or a tube head amp for moving coil cartridges. And oh man, that was a problem because tubes back then, even if you used Western Electric 417As, which are super quiet, tubes had a tendency to be microphonic. So if somebody farted over in a corner of the room, it would then go through your system louder than the music. And it was just, I'm sure we had a product that's nameless, but maybe Jason remembers it fondly, where we ran into the same problem 40 years later with Schiit, and it's just, it's it's microphonic. No matter what you build with tubes, it's still there. Mm-hmm. And that's why we don't do. And though I tried recently, and Jason tried recently to do a modern, up-to-date phono preamp that didn't weigh like some sort of industrial machinery that you could move around without a forklift, that wasn't microphonic, that didn't go hiss, that didn't have all the tube problems for phono, and couldn't do it right then, still can't do it right today. But again, I'm going to defer to Jason when he gets here on that, because he can comment on that. But anyway, so that's my take on tubes. They're great for power stuff. Power amps are great for, headphone amps. But for phono, I'm going to leave it to the people that build the car-priced phono preamps that are willing to maintain them. Because that's the other problem. They need maintenance. And, we're not into building sub-zero preamps. If anybody's had a sub-zero refrigerator, you'll understand. It's a great, great, great refrigerator, but damn, you go broke on the maintenance.
So you mentioned that what there is called an RIAA correction. So That's something that is implemented in the use of analog from turntables, and obviously, in some regard, implemented in the Manny. Can you just explain what RCA Correction is?
I think it stands for Record Industry Association of America, which was a way, it was robbed from the AES, which is the Audio Engineering Society, and it was developed in the 1950s because the problem back then, tubes are noisy, but what's even noisier are record surfaces. Mm-hmm. So what they did was they boosted the highs on the record and cut them on playback to get away from the noise. And back in the old days, RCA did it one way, Decca did it another. Everybody had their own different way of doing it. And I still have somewhere a photograph of the front panel of a 50s mono preamp that had 28 different kind of equalizations on the front. I exaggerate, but it had a lot. Yeah. And then if you forgot to set it right for whatever kind of record you had in there, it was a disaster and not right. So there was an effort to standardize it, which began with AES and then was slightly modified for the low end to be the RIAA standard. And that's what we've had ever since.
Did it change at all with the different record labels over the years, or was it?
Not since about 1952. 52, I think it came in. There were a couple of weird standards, although they still kept the equalization, like they were doing 45 RPM LPs for a while that played for about 4 minutes. And I exaggerate. I think it was more like 12 or 15 minutes. But they still kept with the same curve.
A lot of guys, to bring it back to products that you make and what's coming out next, it's a very consistent topic for these live streams that we do. But a lot of the questions that came in for this show were specifically addressing the Manny. Is there an option? You guys use the Plus and the Max kind of designation for a lot of your second and third gen options. Is there going to be a Manny Plus or a Manny Max soon?
I doubt it. I mean, we're always trying new stuff. We always build new stuff. That's how we have fun. You know, that's how we keep from baying at the moon from, all the other mundane aspects of being in a company. So that's a lot of fun. We're always building things. Some of them are, none of them have been a meaningful, much, much, much better Manny at not a lot more money. Okay, and the rest of them have varied from wet dreams to pretty good, but a pretty good thing that would cost 5 times the money of a Manny, and that's not us. If it's going to be 5 times the money of a Manny, it better be a lot better. Mm-hmm. So the answer is, yeah, we can do better, but the hard part for me, I don't want to speak for Jason, is building something that's really incredibly good that's of value. Because, high-end audio, there's no value. Little value. Okay, and I'm not trying to indict an industry because I'm grateful that the industry's here, or else we wouldn't be. But the tricky part is the value.
What would you say is the status of development on the new analog boards for the Yggdrasil? Are these boards being developed?
They're being developed. They just take a while to go through when we have things like for our bread and butter products like the Modis, the AKM factory burning down. Yeah. We had to stop everything we were doing for a while. We have emergencies that happen that we have to contend with. Building the different analog boards for the Iggy is a lot more fun. And they're out, and they've been out for a while, or they've been out of engineering for a while, not out to the public. So they'll get here as soon as we can get there. We're pedaling as fast as we can. And, we'll get there.
All right, one of the questions that came in was, you stated earlier that you've been porting stuff from DSP to FPGA. Can you explain what FPGA is and why you guys have been doing this?
FPGA stands for Field Programmable Gate Array. Okay, we have been doing all our stuff in DSP processors because when we started doing this, it's been that long, years ago. This is the mid-'80s, 40 years, 30, yeah, a long time. High 30s. The only technology available to do it was DSP processors, which are microprocessors in the same family of what Intel makes or Motorola used to make, or Microchip makes, that are optimized to do digital signal processing. So, given that we're dinosaurs, we do that. The young kids in the block all do FPGAs. Mm-hmm. FPGAs are getting to be more available, and in the next probably 15 years or so, I think we're going to see a bye-bye to DSP processors. Because what everybody does is they build what are called state machines, which means you have these bits in and those bits out, and that take the place of what a programmed DSP chip does. So it's not like you automatically port everything from DSP over to FPGA. You have a filter for an Yggdrasil, a filter for a Goonier, a filter for a Bifrost, and you have to port those all over individually to the FPGA. We're also working on a 1-bit type, ground up our own design decoder, and that's going to be a separate porting. And we got the front end of it done with bugs, and now we got to work on the modulator portion of it. So there's all deals to do, and it's not like you do an FPGA and you're there. You have to redo a new design for an FPGA, just like you have to redo software for different DSP functions along the way, whether it's a gadget, whether it's a. So it's a learning as you go.
So bringing it back to the analog kind of question, why don't you do much analog anymore, since you used to do it so prevalently?
Oh, it's because digital is just what you see is what you get. It's kind of fun to watch, sit in the corner and point and laugh when Jason gets frustrated with analog design. It's digital is just more straightforward, although more complex. It's I guess I've gotten used to it because I've done really pretty much nothing but digital or an occasional throwback project since the 80s. And that's a long time.
This one's a bit of a offshoot, but this one specific question did come in about HDCDs.
Yeah.
The Grateful Dead used to use the HDCD format in mastering. Can you kind of just give us your 2 cents on the format, the pros and the cons, and why the Grateful Dead might have used it in such a manner?
Well, it was developed by Keith Johnson. I don't know whether he's still on the right side of the grass or not. I don't know if he's still with us, but is he, Dave?
It's been about 10 years since I saw him.
Yeah, and he was brilliant. He's a brilliant masterer, okay, and a brilliant artist, because I think you need a little bit of both to be involved here. And it's a way, like one of my political positions, and has been and continues to be, is that measurements as known today, this whole audio precision hand job horseshit, is it's all about what goes on in, flea farts while there's jet engines going by. and is probably almost certainly not audible. What's really critical in measurements is something that nobody's figured out how to do. And what's critical in measurements is what goes on from about 0 dB to minus 70. Okay? And not just how it behaves with sine waves and linearity and crap like that. It's like real music, transients, kaboom drums, and complex waveforms. And that's a sense that has not been developed. That's a discipline of engineering that hasn't been developed. So what happens is you get these sort of nerdisms and people caring about, well, I go down to 22, I go to 22, and I have 24. Well, we're working on 32. Mm-hmm. And it's just all a bunch of just dick-length stories that are just worthless in the real world. And like I say, what really counts, in my opinion, is what's going on down to about minus 70. And I don't know how to tell anybody what to measure. It's not my field. Okay, but I know there's some people who are working on it. Mm-hmm. And until that time, just hopefully someday we'll be free of the bondage of AP measurements and this and that, and so many bits that are beyond the threshold of audibility. And that's just what I believe, and I've stated this for years, and I'm just not about to get fully erect over a 24-bit system, as so many people are.
If someone was to ask you who didn't have a chance to listen to an amplifier, what specs, if any, would you look at in terms of what's available online or these type of things that are published by the publishers to have any value at all? Do any of them really?
40 years ago in the 80s, there was a transient intermodulation distortion, which made a splash for about 2 years, which explained one aspect of it. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then everybody sort of forgot about it because everybody performed horribly at it, except for no feedback systems. Uh-huh. And of course, nobody wants to do no feedback systems, so.
Actually.
Yeah, Jason's here.
Actually. Almost. Because I was kind of in the middle of it with Sumo. And Sumo actually did really good at what they called TIM at the time. But it was because we paid attention to relatively low feedback and also making sure that the loop, essentially the open loop response was greater than the audio band. Now they've kind of explained TIM as a thing that it's really a slew rate phenomenon, which is if you're doing a voltage feedback amp, the slew rate's going to be your challenge. If you're doing a current feedback amp, then distortion and power supply is going to be your challenge. You pick. This kind of stuff, by the way, guys, that Mike like looks at me and laughs when I'm like pulling all my hair out, going, "This friggin' thing, where's that?" Because analog has a lot of that in it. It can work kinda. It can work not good. It can work, really bad. It can work really good and you don't know why, and it can work really bad and you don't know why, and it can work in the middle and you don't know why. And so you gotta, play with it all the time. That's part of what I was doing today is, kind of pulling my hair out on new design, going, why is this thing acting much better in some ways, but much odder in others. But
yeah, maybe this is a philosophical comment, but digital is either black or white. It works or it doesn't. It can work half-assed, but analog is kind of inherently half-assed. And a successful analog person moves it over towards full-ass.
It's all gray.
Yeah.
Analog's extremely gray, and I kind of like the British expressions of that you got half-arsed, but you also got can't be arsed. Well, I've had some analog stuff that just it can't be arsed, or I can't be arsed to actually work on it because it's too painful. But yeah, a half-arsed analog is not good. You need to get it more into the dark gray rather than the the very light gray. We don't know what we're doing.
Fair. Yeah. Another observation is that digital failures result in general no-ops. They don't work, and everybody's sort of silently pondering with knitted eyebrows. Analog failures, across the boards, result more in things being thrown,
Yeah.
clouds of smoke, profanity, invectives, curses of small birds on whatever.
Yeah. Noise, distortion, fires. Last week I sparked up a new thing I was playing with. And I'm like, wow, this thing actually works. That's pretty cool. And it even seems to be fairly stable. We always look at things like on the FLIR when we turn them on, and see if they're getting too hot. And everything will seem pretty cool. And I'm like, that's wonderful. So I went over to the other desk to make some notes. And when I came back, the thing had actually literally caught on fire, melted down, like fried a bunch of resistors, a bunch of output stage, stuff, but only on one channel. And I'm like, oh, this is great, That means, what that means is time to go home, deal with it later. And later I figured out it was actually, the thing was oscillating. It was in low gain rather than high gain, which is where I usually start in high gain. It'll be more stable. But I had it in low gain, and it was oscillating on one channel, and it just decided to oscillate itself to death. Because there's kind of a fine line between an oscillator and an amplifier. Like Mike was saying, shit can pick up radio stations, or it could just actually just create its own sine waves, maybe full-scale sine waves at 50 megahertz or so, which is usually not good for the health of the device. So that's why Mike, digital scares me, because it's like, oh, it's that it works or it doesn't and stuff like or another kind of odd things sometimes. Analog, it seems like you can kind of get it roughly and then finesse it. I say as I finish up a project that literally I did 6 prototypes on and came back to the same point. Sometimes you can finesse it, sometimes you can't. And Mike doesn't like the fires and the various, scary capacitors flying off the board, almost hitting you. Jets of molten silicon, stuff like that. When you're dealing with power amps, especially, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. The closest I ever got to truly toxic things, other than dioxin and Agent Orange in the service, was when I was a kid, when they were running DDT is good for you ads on TV. And the trucks would come by and spray our neighborhood like every couple days.
Well, we're both getting up there when we have memories. One of my first memories of Theta Digital when you were doing the DSP processors, to kind of bring it back to that, was you had to put this big warning on the box that said, you cannot export this to the Soviet Union, or basically this list of Soviet Union allied communist countries. This is not permissible to export. And I'm like, Soviet Union, it's like there are people who are probably listening to this who weren't around, were actually not alive until after it was gone. And for you it was part of a business thing that you had to deal with. And I was aware of it.
Yeah, and today it's such and such is known to cause cancer by blah. Even although there's probably 1 in a billion exposed people that actually got the cancer.
Yeah. No. So I'll stick to analog, but Mike, did a great job on Manny. Manny is really, really hard to beat. As Mike said, we have tried to beat it. Maybe we'll beat it eventually. But how do you beat it? Do you want a tube, preamp? You want a tube phono preamp? It's like, I don't know if either of us are real excited about that one. And then do you do, there's a lot of kind of this weird thing about like people like, oh, I like balanced phono preamps. I'm like, what the heck is a balanced phono preamp?
Are there any balanced cartridges? I suppose they are if you have like...
They're all technically,
But I mean with 6 leads and...
But no, they're all, there's nothing off the ground. But yeah, they're technically floating out there like a transformer. But the problem, I played with balanced phono pre. The problem is you really want to start with a single-ended stage with like massively paralleled discrete devices to actually get the noise down, and then as soon as you do balance, you got 6 dB more noise, which is not what you want, especially on a moving coil type of thing.
And noise is a problem, then they come up with moving coil. Go figure.
Yeah, so even though it looks like we might be kind of lazy about phono preamps, we've been looking into them and just kind of scratching our heads, and not finding what the magic is yet.
Yeah, the value.
Yeah, the value, and
That's the bitch.
as Mike said, the value is really the big thing. I mean, we put in quite a bit of our effort on the stuff that's $150. Those are the things that we have to keep up. The higher the higher value stuff, or the higher cost stuff might also be thought of as high value as well, but it's a different ball game. Where I keep talking about this crazy equalizer we're going to do that's $1,500 in remote control and relay potentiometers and stuff like that. It's like someone from the car priced realm could look at that and go, ooh, that's really high value, or like, oh, that's kind of shockingly cheap, I don't know if I want it in my system. But most normal humans would look at it and go, that's $1,500. I could buy like a pro class laptop and actually have my own consultancy. I could start a company with this. Why would I want a friggin' thing that all it does is equalize music? So
Yeah.
so that's the challenge. We're trying to provide high value everywhere, but what do you mean by value?
Yeah. And value is in the importance that the listener attaches to the music.
Mm-hmm.
So we're heading lower rather than higher in terms of high value, but low in terms of people who would, I got my semantics backwards. We're aiming higher in value, but lower in terms of a market that would perceive people. It's like
it's super specialized. It's like okay, you want to buy knives for your kitchen. You can buy a Henkel's block for $100. You can buy Schoen for up to $1,000 or so. You could do $3,000 stuff. You can do $5,000. You can do $10,000. You can much you can do how much money you got will make you what you want.
Yeah.
So every industry has that.
We're just not interested in catering to the people that want the $10,000 knives, or even that often the $1,000 knives.
Yeah.
The Iggy is about as high as we get. Beyond that, I could come up with a different D to A converter at the risk of squandering all our digital design assets that would sell for, say, $15,000, which is probably ridiculous today, and then have to redesign it all the time. It's easy to get to the top. It's hard to stay there, and then there's always going to be the Joe Blow D-Day is better, and then it's going to be the Herman whatever D-Day can be. You can't. I want to be the best, but I'll settle for. And not even settle for, I want to be more the best for what people want to get. And that's back on that value curve again, the best deal. And when I first brought the $100 Modi to Jason, I said, hey, it's a steak dinner for two. And people don't think about steak dinners for two. And here we got this functional box that makes your music better, and it's a one-time $100. And now we don't know where they're going.
All I can say is if you're going to do a $15,000 deck, you better put a lot of time.
Yeah, because and then you get into the industrial design. I don't know. I don't pay that much attention. I never go up to the floors in the shows where I get a nosebleed. But I don't know what the industrial design on this new shit's like, and I don't care. You know, we're selling function.
Yeah,
You know?
some of the I pay attention to the industrial design because I do that for us. And some of it's really neat looking, but it's usually achieved with milling aluminum, big hunks of stuff like that. That's cool. It's also it's very expensive. We've always been about folded metal, and we're just basically getting better at that. We're going to be showing a lot of new stamp stuff, starting with that 10-tube Folkvanger that actually really kind of pushed the limits of what you can stamp now. We're really kind of going back to old school. Back in the old days when it was stamped or, God forbid, cast. Cast is very, very painful, but we're doing something where you don't have to take a hunk of metal, put 50 hours of machining in it. It's more like you have a sheet, you go blam, and it's done. Then you paint it or finish it. So that's where we're going, and that's what we do. That's what we choose to do. We could do a lot fancier, more expensive chassis, but I'd rather put the money in what's inside of it. I think Mike's on the same frequency there. Yeah.
But you mean you don't want to do like a 10-foot square mouth spiraled horn that has like a driver on the end of it up here that you have to stand on a ladder to get to?
Oh, but those actually have a reason. If you're doing a big horn, it's a big horn. So there you go.
Yeah. But no, we do what we do, and like I say, we're just trying to reach more people, and we're trying to be a better deal, and reaching down to people who wouldn't normally consider high-end audio, and then maybe realize down the road, oh shit, I got a lot better audio than that came with that fucking laptop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, to kind of bring it, I think, full circle, having you participate in analog has been very helpful. I mean, I don't know if people know this, but the first tube amp I designed was actually for Schiit. Sumo didn't do tubes, or at least if they did tubes, it was not under me. And so Mike was the sounding board when I'm like having this weird idea for a Valhalla or whatever. It's like, hey, I think this tube thing will work. And he's like, yeah, it's kind of like the old preamp-ish, but it's a weird output stage, but it'll probably work. And after some mentorship and some simulation, and then building a few and having those get real hot or not. Tubes luckily don't tend to catch on fire too much. Yeah. Then we had our first tube product, and then I've kind of taken it from there.
Yeah. Yeah. Tubes are like plants, they take a lot of abuse over a long period of time before they finally die.
But they also grow, evolve, and if you don't like uncertainty, don't get tubes. I think that's the bottom line. It's like, if you want something you just want to turn on and use every day, it's all the same, solid state. Tubes, tube gear was not designed in a world, saturated in RF from your phone. It may not be as, it may be more sensitive to that than solid state, So you may get weird noises from your phone or from your router, or the tube, might not last, 5,000 hours. It may be shorter, it may be longer. It may be a good tube, it may be a bad tube. It may get noisy, it may start sounding flat. That's, if you're up for that and it's a neat adventure to try a bunch of tubes, that's great. But if you're not, don't. It'll just drive you crazy.
Yeah, they're more like 747s. They are designed for a long product life, kind of inherently, and they require a lot of maintenance. Mm-hmm. And if you're willing to do that, but if you want to buy something that, by all means get tubes if that's what you want to do, but if you want something that doesn't cost that much and runs for a while, and you don't want to have somebody over your house to fix it or help you with it, then there's a lot easier ways to go that are 98.9% as good. It's all. How important is that music to you?
Well, and I think we're getting to the point of trade-offs. I mean, I'm perfectly happy listening to a lot of our solid state.
Yeah.
And I like it too. So.
Yeah. It's the worst of it ain't bad.
Yeah, and then if you really want to put the two together, then you can do a tube DAC, right?
You can do it too, Jack.
No. I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah. Then you've taken a perfectly good, sanely designed, no maintenance required product, and then all of a sudden just complicated it.
Yeah, or depending on the design, it could be less than optimal. That's one place where solid state will get you nice low input impedance for current output stuff very easily, whereas tubes, it's like, what you can drive the cathode? Even that's not that low.
Yeah, ground grid.
Yeah, ground grid.
You can get it down to 30 ohms or so.
Yeah, there's a lot of DACs that will freak out if you try to run it into something that high, if it's expecting current output.
Oh, you mean you can't just put an R there and do the voltage compliance thing?
You
and
can.
Like manufacturers or build something up to store that. People used to do that.
Oh yeah, you can do a lot of stuff.
It's still done, but I know.
Oh, it is? Oh, God. Anyway, but so much for criticism. But, yeah.
There you go.
Any other questions? They're all done.
We
Wow.
scared everyone away.
Yeah. So, any comments from you, Dave?
No, okay.
I love it when we put Dave on the spot. Dave!
Right.
Yeah. Dave, I've been meaning to tell you. Just, you got to learn to shut the fuck up.
Hog of the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we got a lot of the design team here today.
Yeah. Yeah, we do. Yeah. We're missing Ivana and Gerald.
Mhm.
So the two Europeans.
Mhm.
Yeah. But all of the Yanks are here. And okay, well, I'm sitting here going, what do I do now, Coach? What do I do, Brian?
I think we're good. If you're good, no more
I'm
questions.
good.
No more questions on my end. So
And no questions coming in for the field, so I guess everybody shut us off.
a lot of comments, but not as many questions this time.
Ah, okay.
Someone asked if you guys could do it like Bob, not Bob Vila, but who's the guy who paints fluffy white happy clouds?
Oh right, yeah.
Bob Ross. There's like, can we do a version where you guys are like Bob Ross? So
Like what? Where we design a product,
Yeah.
No. Oh yeah, we could do like a Forged in Fire, but for audio gear. That would not be boring as all get out.
Well, we could both be drunk and throw shit on canvas. Like, what's the name of that guy? That just he like dips his fingers and corners of diapers and shit into paint and goes. I'll remember his name. Pollock. Yeah.
Or you could do the three we always talk about. What's the condition of soul? What's going on with the supply backup? And, of course, the transport. Always asked every time. Those three
Oh,
are
the transport. It's getting closer. It's actually getting quite close. I think by now we may have our first three real kind of production beta protos now rather than the alpha units.
I saw two of them running at the shop.
Oh,
recently.
they run. They've been
Yeah, no.
running, but they do things.
No, but I mean, I saw ones that like in chassis without like things hanging off of them. They're looking production-y.
Yeah, they're production.
Yeah.
They're definitely up to betas. we had a debate over a Hearts and Flowers or an industrial display. The Hearts and Flowers won.
That means icons.
Yes.
Yeah. Neither of us did this, so I think it was Dave versus Ivana, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Ivana's thing won.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll have like icons and stuff.
Yeah.
It looks
So-
good.
It actually does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and I'm going to be sending out beta units here probably within a few weeks.
Yeah, the news on Sol
Very few.
is actually not so great. We continue to have basically intractable problems. It is very likely that will be removed from the site soon. As far as the ability to order it, because we really don't know when or if we can build anymore. So it was a noble effort, but I think that it's probably time to throw in the towel.
It's probably a product that's more suitable for high end, where you can order parts for $1,000 and afford to ship 10 and throw the balance away because you're selling them for $50,000.
Yeah, and the casting was real problematic. That's why I was kind of throwing some shade at casting when I was talking about casting versus stamping. But, who knows? Maybe we didn't give it, a hard enough try, but I really don't feel like doing any more cast chassis. I think I'll be doing stamping and NCing in the future. Thank you.
When you figure out how to stamp a Sol platter, let me know.
The guys you're talking about that did the school turntables, they used to stamp their platters. They were stamped steel. But that was
Really?
that was also with a piezoelectric cartridge. So yeah, I mean we're not talking quality here. It was direct drive with like a little rubber tire running it. That was. We're not doing that. We're not doing that.
No.
And if we stamped a Sol, it's a whole different ballgame at that point. How do you do the low mass plinth? Stamp it out of 3/8 inch stainless like they say they can do, but I've never seen them do.
Yeah.
And then bolt everything to it. I don't know. It would be a complete re-engineering.
Yeah. So maybe when we have time, we're bored, which is not likely in the near to middle future.
I got lots of analog stuff to do. Mike's got lots of digital stuff to do, and vice versa, really.
Yeah. So anyway, and what was the third question?
Supply chain.
Supply chain.
Yeah. Hopeful it's getting better. It's hard to tell. If you actually look at the lumber futures and steel futures and stuff, they're down. In fact, lumber futures are almost down to like normal-ish levels. But personally, I'm looking at less new parts. We're getting less incidents of them saying we can't get this, but we can get that. Is this good? But I know that there's still some very long lead stuff that we're sweating a bit, and that one of them is tubes, and that'll continue to be a problem. The other will be like anything that's kind of esoteric. Some of the fancier regulators and some of the DACs and things like that. But I think we've got most of that baked in. I think we're pretty good on all the major stuff. It's delaying the launch of a couple new products because we still can't get some parts that were designed in for that were not our standard thing. But I understand by the end of this month everything should be in stock. Then we'll see.
Yeah. And the Iggy boards. There's a question about Iggy boards. Alternative analog boards, and I think finally we have one manufacturer that builds our boards that tends to do a lot of lower quantity boards. Because of that, they're focused here or there, and they finally got focused on there. So we have some. So those we can start shipping soon. And I'll get into the philosophy of the new boards later, but they're more in the direction of not in the fly shit of what's going on 140 dB down and see what it shows on my $50,000 analyzer. Look how good it is down in the real low signal area. It's designed to be better up higher. Not that it's bad down low, mind you, but there are better down low.
Is that it?
Are we done?
Yeah.